Hello friends, I'm Rob, this is Digital Wastrel, and this video is everything you need to know before getting started with House Delaque. Welcome to the video. This is the 5th guide that I've done for Necromunda house gangs. So if you've seen any of my previous videos, you'll know what the deal is here. But if you're new here, let me just give you a little overview of what's going to be in this guide. So firstly, we're going to do an overview of House Delaque, talking about the strengths and the weaknesses of the gang. And then after that, we're going to go into a bit more detail. I'm going to have a look at the weapons and war gear, and I'm going to give some suggestions as to strong weapon choices, narrative weapon choices, which are options that are maybe not so strong and not so effective on the tabletop, and maybe choices that you take more for fun rather than efficiency. And then we're going to have a look in a bit more detail about unique choices, which are weapons and war gear that are available only to House Delaque. Next, we're going to look at some skills, and I'm going to give some of my suggestions for good skills that you can take on your characters. And then we're going to have a look in a bit more detail at House Delaque's unique skill set, which is called Obfuscation. So each of the house gangs has their own unique skill set that only they get access to, and we'll look at that set in a bit more detail. And then also each of the house gangs has their own unique mechanic, and in the case of House Delaque, it's called Psychoteric Whispers, and basically it means that you can upgrade some of your gangers to become psychic. So we'll have a look at that mechanic in a bit more detail. I'll give you some ideas about how to use it, whether it's good or not, and have a look at some of the psychic powers are good and which ones are maybe worth trying out. Next, we're going to have a look at some roster building advice. So I'll start out with a kind of general overview of things to keep in mind when you're building a gang list for the first time. And then we'll go and have a look at some detailed descriptions of each of the fighters available for your gang, and I'll give some suggestions as to good loadouts and good equipment and ways to run each of the fighter types. And then once we've gone through all of those, I'm going to talk a little bit about where to go after your first few games. So Necromunda is best played as a campaign. I feel like if you're watching Necromunda tactics videos on the internet, you probably already know that. But yeah, so if you're new to the gang and you're new to playing Necromunda and you've just joined a campaign, after you win 1 or 2 games, you've got a bit of a few credits and you're not really sure where to go, how to build your gang out, I'll give you some tips for that. And then I'm going to move on to some hobby tips. So this is, things to know when physically building your gang. So this is advice about how to kit bash, a little bit of a review of what's on the sprue and what weapon options you'll get and stuff like that. And then we're going to close out the video with 4 example starting gangs. So firstly is 1 box WYSIWYG, which is what you see is what you get. So this is a gang list that you can build with just 1 House Delaque box, so it's only got options that are on the sprue. Then we're going to do a 2 boxes and an upgrade pack gang. So this is, if you buy all of the available House Delaque boxes, this is a list that you can make from all of those. And then I'm going to do something a little bit different and try and do like a psychic gimmick gang. So this is a list that attempts to kind of make the most of House Delaque's psychic abilities. It might be a bit fun, something a bit different that you can try. And then finally, I always close out these videos with my own personal starting gang. Right, let's start off with an overview of playing House Delaque. So some of the strengths of the gang. First up, they're kind of a tricksy spoiler/counter gang. So what this means is that each of the other gangs has their own playstyle, and Delaque have options for kind of countering almost anything that the opponent has. Obviously, you have a limited number of credits, and so the specific tools that you have on the battlefield might not be able to counter what you're going up against. But in terms of the overall Delaque toolset, you should have options for dealing with almost anything that the Underhive can throw at you. Next up, Delaque are the only psychic house gang. So there are a few other gangs that you can play in Necromunda who have access to psychic characters, such as Chaos Cultists, Gene Stealer Cultists, and Outcast gangs. But in terms of the main, like the 6 main house gangs, Delaque are the only ones that have psychers in their roster. Next up, they can do pretty well in all aspects of the game. So they have strong options for high movement characters, they have decent shooting abilities, and they have some very scary close combat abilities as well. Next up, they have access to webbers. So each of the house gangs has a few weapon types that they have a kind of synergy with, maybe a slight discount or just access to them a lot in their house list. And yeah, for House Delaque, webbers are definitely one of those, and web weapons are basically really fantastic. Web weapons are maybe one of the strongest weapon types in the game. If you successfully wound an opponent with a web weapon, then they just automatically go down seriously injured. Yeah, no armor save, doesn't matter about any wounds that they have remaining. So yeah, webbers are fantastically strong, and Delaque have them, and that's good. Next up, they have a wide variety of pistols. So obviously some of this is kind of a narrative flavor thing, because, you know, House Delaque are the long trench coat, you know, pistols hidden in the trench coat Matrix cosplay faction, which can be pretty cool. In gameplay terms, this means that the pistol list that all your gangers and various characters have access to is pretty diverse. So you can have some pretty cool weapons spread out across your gang. Next up, you can make some pretty terrifying assassin characters. Spoiler alert, I'm talking about the Nachtghoul, which is like the unique champion type. They're really good. Next up, the Delaque House Brute is cheap and amazing, and also, possibly best, for me anyway, it also comes in plastic. Yeah, if you buy the Champions box, then yeah, it comes with a plastic Brute, so, you know, excellent stuff all around. Next up, Delaque have access to some very, very good hangers-on. Yeah, the last tactics video I did was on House Van Saar, and I really like House Van Saar. I think they're a really cool gang, but House Van Saar's hangers-on list are all fairly dull, not very exciting to use, not very strong. Delaque is the exact opposite. They've got so many really good hangers-on options available to them. And that leads us into the one of the last strengths, and they have access to various campaign manipulation abilities. So this is basically ways to manipulate how the campaign goes outside of, you know, the actual battle. So they have ways to manipulate various scenario rolls that you roll to see, you know, what kind of game you're playing. They can mess around with reputation and stuff between games. Yeah, so if you like that kind of thing, then House Delaque might be for you. On the other hand, what are some weaknesses of House Delaque? Yeah, so spoiler gang means that you may become a target in a campaign. This is obviously just going to depend on the people that you're fighting against. I would say House Van Saar is probably like the most hated. People have a real visceral reaction to House Van Saar sometimes. But House Delaque have a lot of kind of really tricksy and annoying tools in their arsenal. So there is a chance that your opponents may be a bit frustrated with your gang. You know, it's not a big deal, and it depends who you're playing against, but, you know, something to keep in mind. Close combat gangs will outfight you. Shooting gangs will outshoot you. So yeah, you have options in all of these, but if you go head to head with any specialized gang, then you will lose. Yeah, you can't win a close combat match if the Goliaths get up in your face, and you can't outshoot Van Saar. So you basically need to, you know, leverage your strengths against the opponent's weaknesses. Yeah, next up in terms of building your list, you have so many options for your characters, which is good, but it does mean you need to go into games with a plan. It's very easy to get lost when you're kind of putting together a list, I think, and that's where a lot of people's frustrations with trying to play House Delaque might come from. Next up, the house list lacks heavy weapons, and it also doesn't have a great selection of close combat weapons. You have a few decent close combat weapon options, but it doesn't have the variety of a lot of other gangs. You don't get access to chainswords, you don't have access to power swords. Yeah, it's fairly limited in those terms. And yeah, you lack almost all heavy weapons. The only actual heavy weapon you have is the heavy flamer, which is absolute trash. So yeah, house list is a little bit lacking in some areas. Next up, you have a lot of expensive options, which can make it easy to overspend or make an unfocused list. This is kind of similar to what I was just saying about characters. I think when you're playing House Delaque, you really need to have a plan for your gang and a kind of direction that you want to be going in. It's not quite as easy to make a generalist list. Like, yeah, with my House Orlok video, the answer to most questions when you're playing Orlok is, just put more combat shotguns into them. House Delaque isn't quite as straightforward as that. Next up, the base psychic powers are pretty bad. Yeah, I think the psychic power mechanic is very unique, and it can definitely give you your opponents something to think about. But I think as a general thing, it's not super strong. Yeah, and following on from that, any of your characters who are psychic will have the unsanctioned psycho rule, and this means that if you get taken out in the game, your opponent gets extra credits, kind of like a bounty. And yeah, that means that you can give your opponents more credits, especially if you have a bad game and you lose a whole load of characters. Yeah, your opponents can be, have a really good payday, which might not be for the best for you. And then finally, rounding out this negative section, House Delaque have the absolute worst gang box in terms of weapon options. Yeah, I hope you have a decent bits box. So don't get me wrong here, I think House Delaque visually and design are really, really cool. They're one of the nicest looking gangs, but in terms of like the basic sprue options, they're awful. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in the hobby section, but yeah, out of all of the sprues that I've put together, they're the worst. So yeah, kit bashing is your friend. Next up, special mechanics. So these are unique things to do while you're playing a House Delaque gang. As mentioned before, you are a pistol-based gang. You have a lot of cool little pistol options that are not super available to other houses. One of the cheap weapons that you get access to are auto pistols. So auto pistols are normally 10 or 15 credits, I think. But you get access to them for 5 credits, which is pretty cool. So, double auto pistols, potentially getting 2 rapid fire dice for only 10 credits is a pretty good deal. Yeah, Psychoteric Whispers, I've mentioned before, is the unique mechanic for House Delaque, and that gives you access to psychic powers, which is really cool. The Obfuscation skill set gives you various ways to manipulate the scenario. The Whisper Merchant, which is a hanger-on, gives you ways to manipulate between game rolls, very specifically, or best of all, credits, so you can kind of tweak the after-game credits income roll, which is great because, nothing more dispiriting than finishing a game, rolling to see how many credits you get, and, seeing that one come up. So House Delaque, you can get around that. And then Psychoteric Thrall is another hanger-on you get access to. And yeah, Psychoteric Thrall does a whole bunch of stuff, but in terms of unique mechanics, he gives you some leadership and willpower debuff options. So I'll be talking about the Psychoteric Thrall in more detail, because he does a whole lot more. But yeah, just in terms of kind of unique things that House Delaque gets, that's a nice wide range of things that you can do. And yeah, I just shoved this in for a little quick history lesson. Yeah, House Delaque, out of all the house gangs, has changed the most drastically from its original Necromunda 2017 list to its current House of Shadows list. So when current edition Necromunda came out in 2017, Each of the house gangs had their own list and kind of play style that came from that before they got access to like special units and special champions and all that. So originally House Delaque was like a short range infiltrating shooting house. They had access to the shooting skill set, so they played very differently. Is that relevant to you as someone who's new to the gang? Probably not, but I put it in the video and, you know, it's over now. Let's move on to the next part. Right, let's look at some more specific options. Weapons and Wargear, strong choices. Yeah, stub guns, as ever, are great. I love a stub gun. Very, very good. Very big fan of stub guns. They are incredibly cheap. They give you +2 to hit when you're in short range. They have good ammo roll. You can upgrade. You can get a nice strength 4 dum-dum bullets for fairly cheap. Yeah, love a good stub gun. Yeah, you also get access to 5 credits auto pistols, which I mentioned previously. Weighing up the two, personally, I prefer stub guns. I think the +2 to hit at short range kind of is much better for as a backup weapon. But yeah, auto pistols are also fun, and if you prefer the rapid fire dice of an auto pistol, you know, go for it. 5 credits, you can't go wrong. Las guns, as ever, are the go-to option for basic gangers. Yeah, las guns are the preferred weapon of choice, I think, because they have superior short range. It's 18 inches. They have a 2-up ammo roll. They can be very easily upgraded with a hotshot pack. Yeah, las guns are basically just very good. Plasma guns and plasma pistols are still great. House Delaque isn't quite the, you know, isn't famous for plasma in the same way that like House Van Saar is, but yeah, plasma guns and pistols are as good here as they are anywhere else. Don't overlook the humble long rifle. It gives you good stats at an absolute steal. Yeah, compared to some of the other special weapons, long rifles are a little bit not as flashy, but yeah, it's a strength 4, it's great range, you get a bonus to hit, I think, at a certain range. Yeah, they're just really, really solid, and yeah, they're 30 credits, so really, really good choice. Save some credits so you can afford some more of the fancy guns elsewhere. Web guns, web pistols, and web gauntlets. I mentioned these a little bit earlier in the video. Yeah, prepare to lose some friends, but gain some valuable captives. So yeah, if you're playing against new players and the said new players have not experienced the joys of being hit with a web gun template before, then, you know, they might get a bit salty. But, you know, as long as you're the one holding the web gun, you're laughing. Yeah, web guns are also great because you can capture people and you can play some cool, you know, captive scenarios, or you can sell them back to the gang and make some profit. Love a good web gun. Stiletto knife, you also get access to. Yeah, stiletto knives are not like super amazing, but they have the potential to stop an angry Goliath who thinks he's finally got his hands on you. I'm just writing that as a hypothetical scenario. You know, this doesn't come from a very specific memory of a Goliath champion with a renderizer charging in and completely flubbing his attacks and then getting one shot by a Delaque with a stiletto knife. No, that never happened to me, so I don't know what you're talking about. Right, next up, Shiver Sword and Serpent's Fangs. These are the two specific specialist weapons that are available to your Nacht Ghoul. Shiver Sword is like the sci-fi katana thing, and the Serpent's Fangs are like the punch dagger claw thingies. So on the surface, like just pure numbers, the fangs are superior, but they are both very good. So yeah, take whichever one you think looks coolest. Yeah, don't let numbers stop you from living out your cyberpunk katana fantasies. Smoke grenades and infrasight combo fits your playstyle perfectly. So House Delaque do not get access to grenade launchers on their house list, unlike a lot of other gangs. But you can still throw grenades the old-fashioned way. Just run up and throw them. And yeah, infrasights on a long rifle, you know, pick people out of the smoke. Excellent stuff. Grapnel launcher is a piece of war gear that's available to a lot of your characters. Yeah, it's if you don't know what a grapnel launcher is, it's basically a double action to use it. and it lets you move 12 inches in any direction, including up onto ledges and stuff. So yeah, it gives you some Spider-Man action. I don't think the grapnel launcher is really worth taking on if you primarily play on 2D boards, but if you have a 3D board, especially stuff with, you know, many stories high, then yeah, grapnel launcher is very good in those kind of situations. Yeah, the grenade launchers and heavy weapons are not on your house list, but the trading post offers a lot of stuff that does work really well with your skill sets. Yeah, if you're playing along at home, feel free to start a drinking game where you take a shot every time I suggest you visit the trading post. But yeah, like there are not a huge amount of heavy weapons and stuff that are, well, you don't have any heavy weapons available to you on your actual house list, but you have a lot of really good skills that work with heavy weapons, like cunning, so you have access to Overwatch, you have access to infiltrate. So yeah, feel free to visit the trading post and, you know, buy a really cool heavy weapon and stick it on a sneaky old infiltrating guy. Great stuff. And then yeah, while you're at the trading post, don't forget to get your fast-moving jubes, some photon flash grenades, or some demo charges, or some etc. So, same as all the other gangs, your leader and your champions generally get access to weapons from the trading post, but your basic gangers and your Juves only get access to their house equipment list, or house weapons list. However, grenades are Wargear, so that means that you can go to the trading post and you can buy some grenades and you can give them to pretty much anyone in the gang. So yeah, keep that in mind if you have some infiltrating and you want to throw some grenades point blank at people. Next up, we've got the narrative choices section. So I decided to call this narrative choices instead of something like bad choices or, you know, inefficient choices or, you know, awful choices. Yeah, the reason for that is because I think you can take these weapons and you can still win games and you can still make a strong gang and, you know, be competitive with these options. But you should keep in mind that you are taking them for the narrative. Like, you take these because they look cool. So I think if you want to build a gang that can win some games, then, you know, a mix of narrative choices and a mix of strong choices should give you the, you know, enough of a flavor while also being able to compete. But yeah, so that's why I decided to call it narrative choices instead of bad choices, because there are very few completely awful choices in Necromunda. But yeah, having said that, heavy flamers are completely awful. I mentioned it before, I'm mentioning it now, I'm sure I will mention it in future videos. If you have looked at any other Necromunda tactics on the internet, be it written down or on the YouTube, yeah, sooner or later, whoever's doing the tactics will tell you that heavy flamers are bad. Why are heavy flamers bad? Because they are a move and shoot weapon, because they're a heavy weapon, and they are a template weapon, which means they're very short. Obviously, those two are a bad combination. And finally, they are incredibly expensive. So yeah, 3 strikes, they are awful. Next up, digital lasers. This is a bit of a sad one because digital lasers are very cool. They're kind of one of the old school 40k weapons. Digital lasers are basically weapons that are incredibly tiny and put in like little rings or, you know, finger thimble thingies, and they fire out lasers at point blank range. Very weird sci-fi. However, in Necromunda, they are strength 1 and they are awful. Don't take digital lasers. Moving on to things that are a little bit less trash and more, you know, not super amazing, we got the flechette pistols. So I think flechette pistols are very, very cool, and they're not bad, they're pretty good, they will do work for you. However, they're 30 credits each, and I think that's just a little bit too expensive. Yeah, flamers and hand flamers. So as a gang, you have a lot of access to fast-moving infiltrating characters, and obviously that works very, very well with templates. So flamers or hand flamers can work well if you want to try using them, but they do remain a little bit too expensive. Pretty sad because I think flamers are really cool. They're kind of one of the iconic 40k weapons, but yeah, they're just too expensive in Necromunda, I think. And yeah, also other gangs do blaze better than you. Specifically, I'm talking about House Cawdor. House Orlok get access to blaze because they have like the fancy shotgun ammo. And also Gene Stealer cults get very, very cheap infiltrating hand flamers. So yeah, they do that better than you can. And if you do want to infiltrate with a template, then you have better options available to you. And yeah, I'm talking about web weapons. So yeah, flamers, probably that's a thumbs down for me. Next up, some of the unique stuff from House Delaque and some of the things that you probably looked at the box and said, ooh, that's cool. Psychogeists are the kind of hooded prospect type characters. Psychoteric worms are the unique pet that the Psychogeists get access to. They kind of dig through the ground and you can use psychic powers through them. And the Psychomancer's harness is a piece of Wargear that has like 2 big claw things on them. These are all really, really cool and they're not bad, but they probably fall into the category of just being too expensive for really what you get in return. And I think using psychic powers in general are probably this as well. We'll cover all these things in a little bit more detail later. But yeah, in short, I think they're too pricey for what you get. Yeah, but don't be too sad. Let's move on. Right, unique choices. So these are some of the weapons that are only available to House Delaque. Starting off with the Web Gauntlet. So the trading post gives you web guns and web pistols, but web gauntlets are unique to Delaque, and this is a web in close combat version. It's only strength 3 compared to 4 for the pistol and 5 for the gun, but it does have backstab, and the backstab rule means that if you're attacking from someone's back, you get +1 strength. So if you can distract someone with one of your basic gangers, then you can send a web gauntlet champion into their back, hit them with strength 4, take him out. Yeah, I'm not sure whether backstab stacks. So if you have a champion who has the skill backstab and you have backstab on the weapon, I don't know if that goes up to strength 5. If you know the official ruling, let me know in the comments down below. But yeah, otherwise, look it up for yourself, I guess. Flechette pistols have 2 different modes. They have one mode which is basically exactly the same as an auto pistol, but it has the silent trait. So if you're doing sneaky missions, you won't alert any guards while shooting them. And then the second mode is rapid fire toxic ammo. So this is also very, very good. Yeah, very fun, and I think rapid fire toxin is very cool. But yeah, as mentioned before, I think it's just a little bit too expensive, sadly. And now, yeah, the Nachtghoul gets access to the special sword and the claw options, and they are both great. So, the Shiver Sword, the kind of sci-fi katana thing, as I've been calling it, it's cheaper. It has the parry special rule. It gives you +1 to hit, and it also has Sever. And the Sever special rule means that you don't roll an injury dice. The person that goes down just automatically goes out of action if they're taken to their last wound with this weapon. Yeah, I think the design of this is meant to be good for fighting multiple enemies. So if you imagine that your Nachtghoul with the Shiver Sword is, yeah, fighting 2 people at once, you got the parry and the +1 to hit. You have a 2-up weapon skill to start with, but if you're fighting multiple people, you're going to get debuffs, and the parry will keep you alive a little bit more when they strike back. Sever also means that as soon as you take one out, they go down. You don't need to spend an action or a free action doing coup de grace. And if you're fighting multiple people, you can't do coup de grace anyway. So yeah, I think basically the sword is meant to be designed for, you know, going toe-to-toe with multiple people. The Serpent's Fangs, however, have a better strength bonus. The big thing here is that they are paired. So the paired weapon trait means that you double your attacks characteristic when you charge. And you also get +1 for attack for charging. And they also count as 2 weapons, so that's another +1 on top of that. So yeah, you get a huge amount of dice when you charge with the Serpent's Fangs. They also have the phase special rules, so you ignore all saves. No armor save, no force field save. And they also have rending, which gives you extra point of damage on a 6. So yeah, I think all of these things basically just drown out any of the advantages of the Shiver Sword. But yeah, the Shiver Sword is not bad, it's just that the Serpent's Fangs are that much better than anything else. But yeah, cheaper might mean that you can take a sword instead. Right, and then finally we're going to go on to the Psychomantic Claws. So these come as part of the Psychomancer's Harness, if you want to buy that for your Psygeist prospect. And then the Piscean Spectre, which is your House Brute, has the Psychomantic Claws as well. So these are also paired, so double your attacks on the charge. They also have phase, so ignore save. They have the shock special rule, which is, I think, auto wound on a 6 to hit, maybe. And then they also have 3-inch versatile, so you don't even need to be base to base with the enemy, so they can't hit you back. Yeah, these are very, very good, and they're one of the reasons why the Piscean Spectre is so good. So with all of that said, let's have a look at some skills. So the Master of Shadows is your leader, and they have access to agility, cunning, and leadership skill sets. The Phantom is your kind of vanilla flavored champion, or your basic champion, and they have access to cunning, savant, and obfuscation skills. The Nachtghoul is your unique assassin type champion, and they get access to agility and cunning. Psygeist and Shadow are your two Juve type characters, and if they get as far as needing a skill, they get access to cunning. And then finally, your Ghost is your basic ganger, and if you promote a Ghost to a specialist, they get access to cunning and savant skills. So we're only going to look in any detail at the Master of Shadows, the Phantom, and the Nachtghoul, because Psygeists, Shadows, and Ghosts don't start with any skills. So that's kind of like a future Delaque problem, figuring what skills to take for those characters. But yeah, just keep in mind, cunning is very useful. Like infiltrate and Overwatch will probably be good for if you take a skill for those. And savant, of course, is excellent. Another thing to point out is that your Phantom is the only character in the list that gets access to savant straight off the bat. Yeah, savant is one of my favorite skill trees. If you've seen some of my other videos, you might remember me singing the praises of the savant skills, especially Fixer. Basically, I think you win or lose campaigns based on the amount of credits you get. Credits let you survive losses and get stronger from wins. And so yeah, every little bit of income helps, and so having access to the savant skill Fixer is obviously very, very good. Phantoms are also the only character in your list that gets access to obfuscation skill. Yeah, which is the unique Delaque skill set. So yeah, it's a little bit weird that it's only on that one character. So yeah, all of these things combined means that your Phantom is really one of the most difficult characters to build, because you have so many different options to go for and so many different ways that you can play them. Yeah, so really, I think the other characters are fairly straightforward in terms of what skills you should take for them, but Phantom has a lot of options and it can be a bit of a tough choice. All right. Master of Shadows. So yeah, the first skill that I'm going to talk about is Overseer, which is a leadership skill. So if you don't know, Overseer means that you basically give up your leader's entire activation, and in exchange you give that activation to another character who is within a certain radius of them. And you can combine this with group activation, which your leader has. So that means that you can group activate, you can trigger your leader, you can use Overseer to make another character move instead. Then you can, for example, do move, and then as part of the second part of the group activation, you can trigger that character again for his other move, and then he can activate again. So yeah, this means that you can, get heavy weapon characters shooting multiple times, or you can get template characters doing move, move, and then move, shoot. All kinds of shenanigans you can get up to with Overseer. It's very, very strong. A lot of people on the internet are not so keen on this skill because it's too powerful, and I think if you're not prepared for an Overseer coming at you, then it's definitely has the potential to feel bad. Has a kind of similar feel to getting double turned in Age of Sigmar. You know, there are ways around it, but it's definitely got some feel bad moment potential. So, you know, keep that in mind. My Necromunda groups that I generally play with so far haven't really used Overseer that much, or not against me anyway. So, you know, maybe I'm underselling how nasty it can be. But yeah, keep in mind, it does have a bit of a reputation. So why is it good for Delaque gangs? Basically, I think unlike characters from other gangs, unlike other gangs' leaders, the House Delaque leader is kind of cheap enough that this can be a great option. And also you have access to a lot of fast-moving short-range guns and nasty close combat threats that you can use the skill to kind of slingshot into the enemy. So I think, yeah, you have a lot of good targets and you're not really wasting the leader in the same way that for example, a Goliath leader really needs to be up front, mixing it up. You know, wasting a Goliath leader on Overseer isn't really a good choice, but yeah, House Delaque, Overseer, it's a good combination. Next up, I'm going to suggest the Mentor skill. So this isn't a good pick for everybody. What the Mentor skill does is it means that if a friendly character within a certain radius gain some XP, you can take a check and potentially give them extra XP. So yeah, it helps you kind of power level some of your friends. And in the Delaque list, I think if you wanted to try and make Psychogeists and psychic characters work, then the Mentor skill might be a way to make that happen. So yeah, this is definitely like a gimmick build. Yeah, I don't think it's definitely not for everyone, and even then it might not really work that well, but yeah, if you really want to try, you know, power leveling some psychic prospects, then yeah, maybe try Mentor. We'll have a look at that in the list at the end of the video, but just throwing it out there. Next up, Overwatch. So the previous two skills, I think, are very specific builds that you need to have in mind, but Overwatch is quite a good general purpose skill. So your leader has a good selection of special weapons to take advantage of this skill. Long rifle and plasma gun are probably best for an Overwatch master. And then finally we've got dodge or spring up. And yeah, these skills are very useful if you want to go for a more aggressive loadout. So I think Delaque leaders are quite good just hanging around at the back and, you know, being kind of a more support role. But if you do want to get up close and mix it up in close combat, then spring up or dodge are good choices. Next up, the Phantom. So yeah, Phantom, again, Overwatch is a good choice for this character. There's a lot of really good and very expensive guns that you have available to you all through your gang. So it might be that you want a cheap champion, and in that case, Overwatch is a very good choice. Yeah, cheap long rifle champion with Overwatch is great if you want to save some credits. And also you can combine it with a trip to the trading post and you can pick up a heavy weapon or a grenade launcher or something similar. This is a really good combination. So yeah, later on in the campaign, you know, if you want to experiment with some more fancy guns, then Overwatch is a good skill for that. Infiltrate is another popular skill. So the most common combination with Infiltrate is giving the Phantom a web gun, and this has huge potential. So obviously the web gun is a template weapon, so very strong but very short range. So infiltrating up, yeah, you can do the math on why that is a good combination. You can also, however, give it to a long rifle fighter, and especially if you're playing 3D boards and, you know, you have like sniper towers around the map, yeah, you can combine it with a long rifle and get a nice vantage point to pin down enemies. That can be a good combo. So yeah, infiltrating is normally combined with a template weapon, and personally I've never really found infiltrate to be worth it in that situation. I find that isolated fighters, you know, maybe they get a shot off, or maybe, you know, the enemy gets to them first and they tend to get taken out quite easily. But I will readily admit that my deployment skills in war games are awful. So if you have better deployment skills and you're more sneaky and cunning than I am, then I think it has the potential to be very nasty. So yeah, I'm not very good with infiltrate, but you may rate it higher. Fixer, I spent quite a long time very recently just yelling about Fixer. Yeah, more credits are more good. Are they worth the loss of a more active skill? That's the big question. Yeah, this is the only place you can get Fixer, so yeah, something to think about. Munitioneer is another savant skill. So this is not as exciting as other skills, but you do have a lot of weapons with bad ammo stats. So plasma, web weapons, or grav weapons also have really bad ammo roll. So yeah, munitioneer is not as fancy and not as sneaky as some of the other skill choices, but you know, it might do you some good. And then faceless. This is an obfuscation. Have I said that right? This is an obfuscation skill. So we're going to look at it in a little bit more detail when we get to the looking at that skill tree. But yeah, this gives you some protection against being targeted. So this might be a good choice for a webgun champion. Something a little bit different to infiltrate, or you know, pick up infiltrate and then pick up faceless. Yeah, so there's so many choices for Phantom. It's you really need to decide what role you want, and then you can choose the skill that works best with them. Nachtghoul is your infiltrating assassin champion, and yeah, you get access to the infiltrate skill, but do not take the infiltrate skill. So actually, on the Nachtghoul's rule section, you have an ability called From the Shadows, which just comes as standard, and that basically works as a slightly different type of infiltrate. So yeah, you don't need to take the infiltrate skill. It's a waste to take that skill. Spring Up is the best and the strongest choice. So this means that if you're pinned, you can make an agility test, and your agility is pretty good. And if you succeed, then you get up as a free action, which is very, very good. Means that you still have both your actions to grapple and launch it away, or to charge to things that you want to be doing a lot. This basically lets you charge even if someone manages to pin you. And the Nachtghoul is fairly direct. You basically want to just get close to people, charge them, and murder them. So yeah, if you're getting pinned, then you can't charge, and that is bad. If you feel you need some defensive power, you can also check out dodge or evade. But I think basically, you're better off defending yourself by murdering as many people as you can by charging. So yeah, I recommend Spring Up. Alright, let's have a look at Obfuscate, which is Delaque's unique skill set. Mentioned previously, this is only available as a primary skill set to your Phantom. So let's start with Faceless. This means that an enemy must pass a willpower check to target this fighter at range until the first time they activate. So this basically gives you kind of protection before activating. So, you know, kind of a bit of a guarantee that you actually get to take a turn. This might be good on a high priority Phantom. But yeah, do be aware of the willpower stat of your usual enemies though. And obviously enemy champions and enemy leaders tend to have higher willpower stats than other goons. So yeah, don't rely on this keeping you completely safe. But it might help. Next up, Psy-Touched. This means you can reroll willpower checks when using/resisting psychic powers. Basically, if you want to build a psychic Phantom, then this is a pretty useful skill to take. Next up, Takedown. So this means that you roll dice, and on a 4+, you have the opportunity to capture any enemy that is taken out by this character, assuming you win the game. You can use this in campaigns for fun and profit. Choosing who to capture at the end of a game is very, very good. You can use this to steal high value enemy gangers, ransom them back to their owners, or sell them to the guilders to get them out of the campaign. This is really cool. It is a skill that has to be taken on a Phantom, and Phantoms are not quite as killy as some of your other characters like the Nachtghoul, but I think it's quite a cool one. Next up, Rumor Monger. So this means you can make an int check after the battle, and if you succeed, you gain some reputation, and the enemy gang lowers their reputation. So yeah, Delaque have loads of great hangers-on available, so good reputation is very good for you. But generally speaking, I feel like you're probably better off focusing on winning games and gaining reputation the old-fashioned way. Yeah, I've always found a lack of credits as a bigger bottleneck to buying more hangers-on than not having enough rep. But, you know, it's a fun one and it might be cool to use. Next up, Fake Out. So in this one, you can roll 3d6 and you can pick 2 when you're rolling for the mission. So obviously this is assuming that you're rolling randomly for the mission, but it's really going to depend on how your group generates missions. Obviously some groups, they just decide amongst themselves which missions they're going to be playing. Sometimes maybe your arbitrator's going to tell you which mission you do. So really depending on how your group generates missions, this can be very strong or it can be completely useless. But assuming that it works as stated, then if you do your homework and you figure out which scenarios are really good for you and you have a plan for how to win those scenarios, then yeah, it can be very, very strong. Finally, Doppelganger. So in this one, the enemy leader makes an int check. If they fail, it means you can bring an extra fighter to the game. So more fighters is incredible. Yeah, having more bodies on the battlefield is really good. However, enemy leaders generally have pretty good int stats, so it really is going to depend on your regular opponents. Yeah, if you fight a lot of Ogryn, this is a must-take, because, you know, ho-ho, Ogryns are done. If you fight Vansar, this is probably completely useless. Let's move from skills and have a look at the Psychoteric Whispers, which is House Delaque's unique mechanic. Yeah, so every house gang gets their own unique mechanic, kind of a unique little flavor thing. And yeah, for House Delaque, it is psychic, people, psychers. So how does it work? Basically, when you are recruiting characters, so when you're adding gangers to your roster, you can pay credits when you're recruiting them, or mid-campaign you can pay XP and upgrade them that way, and you can gain psychic powers. If you pay credits when they are recruited, you gain the power as well as a skill. So yeah, you can get more psychic powers using XP, but if you do the credits at the start, yeah, it comes as well as. Right, so the Master of Shadows and the Phantoms can both be upgraded. Psygeists, who are your psychic prospects, they come as standard with Psychoteric Whispers. It's part of their cost. So Nachtghouls can maybe be upgraded. Yeah, check with your arbitrator. So basically in the Nachtghoul section, in their fighter description, it says they can be upgraded. However, if you go to the Psychoteric Whispers later on in the book, it says only Masters of Shadows and Phantoms can be upgraded. Which one is correct? I checked the FAQ and it doesn't say anything. In my opinion, it's fine, because my reasoning is that Psygeists, being the psychic prospects, have the option, if they get promoted, to turn into Nachtghouls. So it stands to reason that Nachtghouls could probably be psychic. However, as ever, if there is a bit of a question about how anything works, always check with your arbitrator and the people you're playing with. You know, I'm just a dude on the internet. Probably not very likely that you're going to play a game with me, so my opinion is not super useful. I mean, my opinion is amazing. Please subscribe to my channel. Right. Yeah, so if you upgrade in this way, you gain the Unsanctioned Psychic ability, which, as I mentioned earlier in the video, the enemy gets bonus credits if this fighter goes out of action. I think you also get a little bit of a bonus if you sell them to the slavers as well, also the guilders. Psychic characters also have the Psychoteric Choir ability. So what this means is when the Psyker is using their powers, they can get bonus range, and the enemy gets kind of a debuff to their int for resisting, for having friendly fighters near the Psyker. So yeah, basically, friendly fighters hanging out near the Psyker when they're casting their powers makes them go further and makes the enemy less likely to resist them. Are they worth using? So yeah, is Psychoteric Whispers actually worth trying to make work on the battlefield? So yeah, most of these powers are resisted by the int stat. So you are at a disadvantage if fighting Vansar or Orlok a lot. I feel like one of the themes running through this video is there's a lot of, well, it depends who you play, but that really is the case, you know. If you're primarily fighting Vansar and they're resisting a lot with their high int, it's going to be frustrating, you know. Most powers are also very, very short range, so you're going to need like the Psychoteric Choir rule to maybe bump it up to actually get it to use. But even then, a lot of them, because they're such short range, they're very hard to use, and it's probably worse than just shooting someone. You know, you have to get in range, you have to get set up so, you know, the enemy is in the right place, and then you have to make the willpower check to cast the power, and then maybe they get to resist it. You know, you can just buy an auto pistol for 5 credits and shoot someone. Next up, yeah, champions would probably be better off using their superior weapons. So yeah, your Nakgul has very, very good close combat weapons, and your Phantom has access to, you know, web guns and plasma guns and stuff. So yeah, the psychic powers are kind of competing with those. And Zeitgeists, who are your psychic prospects, yeah, they start with a very poor willpower stat, so that's quite sad. Yeah, so the Psychoteric Whispers powers, I think, are a little bit disappointing. Now, if you are aware of the Book of the Outcast, which is the the Outcast gangs expansion for Necromunda, that came with a whole bunch of different psychic powers. Had like 6 different psychic trees with loads of different powers, and yeah, those powers are all very, very good. So, do you, as House Delaque, get access to those far superior powers in the Book of the Outcast? So the GW actually FAQ'd this, and they said that you can take Book of the Outcast powers, which is great because they rule. However, you do need to start with a Psychoteric Whisper and then spend XP later to get a new power. So, my opinion, if you do want to go for a Psychic Gang and try and make these things work, you know, play around with some of the Psychoteric Whispers, but I think if you actually want to make an effective Psyker, your goal should be to level up, and then you use XP to buy superior powers from the other Psychic trees, and then also bump up your willpower stat if necessary. Having said all that, let's have a look at some, maybe some good Psychoteric Whispers powers that you can try using. Right, so first up, Existential Barrage and Terrible Truths. I feel like these two are maybe 2 of the strongest powers in terms of effect if they actually go off. So yeah, Existential Barrage, if it works, can break the enemy, and Terrible Truths can make them insane. And being broken and being insane are both very, very bad conditions for fighters to be under. So these are good powers if they work. They are both opposed powers, so that means the enemy gets a chance to resist them, and they are also very short range. So overall, I think it's very tough to get these to work. But if you want to give them a go and you can get them to go off, yeah, they'll be good if they work. Next up, Spatial Psychosis. This is probably the best all-round power. Yeah, take this one if you have no other ideas about what to take. So Spatial Psychosis has a 12-inch range and no line of sight needed, so much longer than a lot of other powers, and no line of sight is great, so you can hide around a corner and psychic people from there. What it does is you choose an enemy, and then they become pinned. And if they are near the edge of a building or ledge or something, then they have a chance of falling off, which is pretty funny if it works. But mostly what you want to be using it to do is to pin enemies. So yeah, you hide behind a wall and then you use it to constantly knock over an enemy champion so they can't charge you. Yeah, it's not amazing, but I think it's definitely got some use for, locking down enemy gangs. Um, Next up, Suicidal Embrace. So what this does is, if it's successful, the enemy needs to make a melee attack against themselves with a weapon that they're holding. So this is also resistible by int. So what you want to do is you want to aim this one at very strong and beefy but dumb fighters. So good targets for this are Genestealer Cult Aberrants. Again, I've been the target of that and had my own Aberrant eviscerate himself. Goliath Stimmers, also a good choice. And most Brutes also have a pretty poor int stat and some nasty close combat weapons. So yeah, Suicidal Embrace is pretty good. Next up, I think, is a pretty techie one, Penumbral Mirror. So what this one does is it kind of works as teleport slingshot power. It also doesn't need line of sight, which is very good. So yeah, the way this works is your Psycho chooses one friendly fighter within 5 inches of themselves, one enemy within 5 inches of themselves, and then you get to redeploy the friendly fighter within 5 inches anywhere of the enemy. So yeah, you kind of flip them over and put them down somewhere else. And yeah, you don't need line of sight, so you can teleport people through walls. You can teleport said friendly fighter into melee with the enemy that you target, which, I don't know, might have some potential. But yeah, this is not going to be useful in all situations, but I think there's definitely some shenanigan potential. Especially if you play on a lot of terrain heavy boards with like walls and corridors and stuff. I think could be quite good for that. Yeah, one suggestion that I have is you can group activate a Phantom and a Psyker. And then the Psyker uses Penumbral Mirror to teleport the Phantom into position through a wall, directly positioned in behind a bunch of enemies. And then the Phantom web guns said enemies. Yeah, not one for all the time, but I think it could have some potential uses. Right, so all of those out of the way, let's have a look at some general roster tips. Start with the one that I always say, boys before toys. Yeah, more bodies will usually be better than a fully tricked out gang. Yeah, very, very tempting when you're making a Necromunda gang to load up with loads of guns, loads of war gear, armor and all kinds of grenades and stuff. But yeah, generally speaking, keep them lean and have more of them. For Delaque specifically, I'm going to say aim for 7 to 8 bodies minimum. I'm going to say 7 bodies minimum. Aim for 8. 8 is a good number, and 9 is really good if you can manage it. I would say keep these numbers in mind, even if it means just bringing guys with a stub gun. More elite gangs are possible, but it is a gamble. Basically, if you have a bad game and you end up with loads of fighters in recovery or dead, then you're going to go into your next game weaker if you don't have the numbers, and then possibly death spiral. So death spiral means, yeah, you have a bad game. Next game you lose because all your characters are in the hospital. That game you lose, so then you're in trouble the next game, and so on and so on. You just keep going down and down. And the best way to avoid that situation is having more bodies. Yeah, so I think that's the most important thing to keep in mind when you're building a list. In terms of armor, mesh for the leaders and the champions, nudity for everyone else. Yeah, if you have some spare credits, I think you can hand out some flak armor or mesh armor here and there. But I think in general, you're better off with more bodies. So flak armor is only 10 credits, but across a whole gang, that can be the same as a whole extra fighter. Yeah. Figure out what role you want your leader and your champions to play, and then equip them with that in mind. After you've built your champions and your leader, I think then you can fill up the rest of your list with fighters to support. So you want some fighters who can do some long range stuff, so las guns. Then maybe some fighters to move up alongside your close combat characters. So, shotguns are good there, or yeah, anything like that. Let's get on to some specifics, because I know people love specifics. Master of Shadows loadout ideas. Yeah, so this is how to equip your leader. Straight up, the basic box doesn't give many great starting loadouts. It's not super exciting. Yeah, your Master of Shadows had good stats, but nothing outstanding. I think basically they're cheap enough that you can go for a support role quite easily with your leader. I said it before, but decide on a role for your leader and then choose weapons and skills as appropriate. Here are some suggestions. Overseer support leader. So yeah, if you want to run the Overseer skill, then a long rifle is a good match for that. You basically want to keep them cheap because the Overseer, you're giving away your activation to someone else, so you don't want to be spending a bunch of credits on a gun you'll never get to fire. Ranged loadout type leader, give them a plasma gun or a long rifle and Overwatch. If you want to go for more of a close-up loadout, you can try plasma pistol, web gauntlet, and then maybe a stub gun or auto pistol as a backup, and then you take the spring up skill. So this isn't going to be, you're not going to be able to go toe to toe with like dedicated close combat people, but you'll probably be nasty enough to hold your own on the front lines. If you do want to make a proper fighty leader, another option is to keep him cheap at gang creation and then buy him like a chain axe or a power sword or something like that from the trading post. And then finally, I've got the Psychic Mentor loadout. So yeah, I mentioned this a little bit previously when talking about the Mentor skill, but this loadout gives him the web gun and then the Mentor skill. So the idea is that you're hanging out with some Psygeists, and then you move in with your leader and you web a bunch of dudes up with the web gun, and then you can send in the Geists to coup de grace them, and then coup de gracing them will get the Geist's XP, and you get the Mentor skill to get more XP, and then the Psygeists get stronger. Yeah, that's the theory behind that one. Yeah, at the end of the video, if you stick around, one of my lists is going to be trying to put this loadout into a full list and try and get that working. Next up, champion loadout ideas. Phantom is your flexible basic champion. So yeah, plasma guns or web guns are always worth a look on this fighter type. Long rifle is also good if you want to keep things cheap. You can also go shopping at the trading post after your first game for a heavy weapon or a grenade launcher if you want a properly shooty champion. And obviously Overwatch is good for all of these guns. If you decide to go Psycho with this character, yeah, keep the gear cheap as they will mostly be using their powers. Alright, and then also you've got your Nakgul, who is your assassin type close combat champion. Sword or claws, we've talked about this a few times already in the video, but just to reiterate, the sword gives you parry, sever, +1 to hit, might be a bit better if you're fighting multiple enemies, and also it's a little bit cheaper. Claws will just straight up murder people, whoever you charge though, but yeah, a little bit more expensive, and if credits are tight, might be worth taking a sword instead. And also, the Nakgul wants to be charging and in close combat as much as possible. However, if you are not in a position to charge, a backup pistol might not be a bad choice. And yeah, spring up skill to keep them moving obviously is good for that. Right, ganger loadout ideas. So Ghost is the name of your basic ganger type. Yeah, las guns are good for pinning targets at range. So you don't get discounts on your las guns like House Escher or House Van Saar, but even at full price, it is still a great choice for gangers. You can still upgrade these with hotshot packs. Delaque don't have hotshot packs on their house list, so you will need to use a trading post to get them, but you can still upgrade them, and that's probably not a bad choice for later in the campaign. Shotguns are also available for some close range punch, and again, don't forget to check the trading post for different ammo types. They're good for upgrading after you've got a few games under your belt. You also have access to 5 credit auto pistols for that kind of Matrix vibe. Ganger with 2 auto pistols might be quite fun. If you hit someone, then you've got the rapid fire dice. Pretty cool. And then talking about pistols, you also get access to the grav pistol. So grav pistols function almost identically to grav guns. They are a little bit shorter range though, but because they're a pistol, they're not a special weapon, which means all your gangers have access to it. So yeah, pistols in this situation are kind of the special sauce of the gang. It means that you can sprinkle some kind of budget pistol or some budget special weapons throughout your regular gangers, which means that there's no guarantee as to you know, which basic gangers are going to have a really nasty weapon to throw at the enemy. Yeah, specialist ghosts get access to special weapons, funnily enough. Long rifle is good here if you have a few spare credits, but otherwise, yeah, if you want to take some kind of special weapon, it's better off spending the credits on a special pistol, either grav pistol or shadows. So shadows are your basic Juve type. Yeah, shadows are cheap and have movement 6. They have very bad weapon skill and ballistic skill, but that is unimportant because they get access to web pistols. So web pistols are template, so that means the bad ballistic skill doesn't matter. They're movement 6 and they have a very cheap body, so this is a great combination. Web pistols are very expensive, but because the actual shadow is so cheap, if the shadow dies, as long as you have fighters on the battlefield at the end of the game, you will manage to get their gun back. So yeah, just buy a new gun, just buy a new guy, give them the previous guy's gun, send them back out there. Yeah, the shadow is replaceable, but the web pistol hopefully you can keep. Yeah, so these are cheap enough to spam. However, if you do spam, your opponents may slap you across your face, and they would be well within their rights to do so, I think. Yeah, like, don't spam stuff. This is Necromunda, you know, this isn't 40k. Don't just take the most efficient option and then spam it, because that's boring. It's not that kind of game, you know. Necromunda people are a better class of player, probably. Next up, Psychogeists. So yeah, these are your psychic prospect characters. So yeah, as mentioned before, they probably come under the category of too expensive for what you get, because they are competing with other expensive but good options. So yeah, Psychogeists are a little bit more expensive. They do still have a good move stat. They are very average to poor stats everywhere else. They are psychic as a baseline though, so that's quite neat. So yeah, in my opinion, there's two basic ways that you want to run these guys if you do want to try using them in your gang. First up is what I'm calling the Psy Cadet loadout. In this case, keep them cheap. Give them a stub gun and maybe a stiletto knife if you're feeling fancy. And then basically what they want to do is follow your champions around and then coup de grace enemy for XP. And then spend that XP on upgrading their willpower and buying them some new powers as soon as possible. Psychoteric worms can be useful for these characters, but I would wait and buy the worms after you've improved your willpower stat a bit. Psychoteric worms are incredibly expensive, so kind of a waste to have them on a trash low-level Psygeist. But yeah, after they've leveled up a bit, worms are worth looking at. And then another way that you can run them is with the Psychomancer's Harness loadout. So yeah, this is the kind of big Dr. Octopus claws type harness thing that you can put on them. So the Psychomancer's Harness gives you +2 movement, and it also gives you paired Psychomantic claws. It also gives you the ability to move up and down terrain without taking any movement penalties. So yeah, you're really Spider-Manning it around the place. So yeah, paired Psychomantic claws means that you get 4 attacks on the charge, 1 attack base doubled up to 2 because it's paired, +1 for charging, +1 for having 2 weapons because it's a paired weapon. So yeah, you're rolling 4 dice on the charge. You're only hitting on 4s. You do have strength 4, and you do have 3-inch versatile and no save, so it's not bad. But 4 attacks hitting on 4s, that's not really enough of a guarantee. That is still bad enough that you can whiff that. And yeah, it's very expensive, and yeah, your basic combat stats are just average or below average for the price. So yeah, altogether this thing has a very similar vibe to Vansar's Spider Rig for the Archaeotech champion type. Yeah, if you've seen my Vansar video, you'll know that I'm a bit down on the Spider Rig. It's a bit disappointing. It's just too expensive for the kind of mediocre performance you get out of it, sadly. But I think the Psychomancer's harness is a lot better than the Spider Rig, because the big thing that distinguishes this one is that for this loadout you have movement 8, which is nuts. Movement 8 is faster even than the Vansar's hoverboard things. Yeah, it's very, very good. Yeah, so your close combat stats are still not amazing. So yeah, you're not going to win against dedicated close combat fighters, but you are fast enough to be able to pick off lone targets, grab loot boxes, etc. So yeah, if you want to try the Psychomancer's harness, basically you want to use it as a bully unit. Go around, find an enemy that can't defend themselves properly, and then beat them up and run away before they can get before his friends come and help. Yeah, overall, is it worth the huge price tag? Probably not, especially because with the Psychomancer's harness, you're kind of paying the credits for the psychic powers, which you're not really using because you want to be running around and attacking people. But it does look cool, so if you do want to try using it, I think you will have fun with it. Right, let's move on to brutes, beasts, and hangers-on that are available to House Delaque. First up, the Piscean Spectre. So yeah, this is very cheap by brute standards. It's one of the cheaper brutes out there. It's also flying. It's fairly fast. It's psychic as well, on top of everything else. Has loads of attacks. Yeah, the weak point about the Piscean Spectre is mostly that it's toughness 4. So it's a little bit weaker than other brutes. So yeah, if you put it front and center, then the enemy will be able to take it out without too much trouble. You can't really throw it directly in the enemy's face like some of the other brutes that are out there. However, it's just really good for the price. And on top of all that, it's plastic. So yeah, if you buy the Necromunda champion box, then you also get this thing. Yeah, and it's very good. So yeah, recommended. Ambots and Ogryn are also available. They're the generic brute types that all gangs can take. But yeah, it's hard not to just recommend taking a Spectre. Ambots are still good, and I think maybe if you wanted like the toughness 5, you wanted more of a direct tank unit. Ambots also have infiltrate, so there's probably a bit of synergy there with House Delaque. But yeah, it's difficult to recommend taking one of these two instead of just spending the credits on a Piscean Spectre. Onto the exotic beasts. So the Psychoteric Worm, I've mentioned him, her, it. I've mentioned the worm a few times already. The Psychoteric Worm is the exotic beast. It is only available to the Psygeist, the psychic prospect. And the way it works is that it can extend the range of a Psygeist's powers. So basically the way it works is that you measure psychic powers from the worm instead of the Psygeist. The worm also is relatively fast and can dig underneath terrain, so it can go through walls and kind of pop up behind the enemy. Yeah, it kind of works in a similar way to a repeater if you've played Infinity, or like the spell portal mirrors if you've played Age of Sigmar. You kind of shoot your psychic powers out of the worm instead of the Psyker. Yeah, I think it's worth getting one for your Psyker eventually if you do get Psygeist and upgrade him. But it's definitely too expensive at gang creation, especially considering that the Psygeist comes with a very poor willpower straight off the out of the book. So you'll need to upgrade your Psygeist before you can get some good use out of the Psychoteric Worms. Right, Cephalopod Spectres are the kind of generic, well not generic, but they're the other type of exotic beast that Delaque get access to. All fighter types get the ability to take a Cephalopod Spectre. And yeah, they're really bad, sorry. They're floating cyber octopuses, so they should be really cool, but they're not. All they do is kind of float around. They're a bit of a guard thing. They have a bit of a bonus to spotting people. And then if their owner dies, they kind of do a little like AoE strength 1 attack thing. But yeah, they're just bad, and there are no models available for them. No official models out for them yet. So yeah, sorry cephalopod spectres, but you're bad. Moving on to the hangers-on, and as I mentioned at the start of the video, you have a lot of really good hangers-on available to you. Starting with the Psychoteric Thrall. So Psychoteric Thrall is basically a brainwashed enemy fighter, and they work in a similar way to the Psychoteric Worm in the fact that you can project psychic powers through them. Psychoteric Thralls, however, they don't swim underground because they're just dudes. But anyone in your gang can put psychic powers through them. So yeah, you send him around the corner, and then all your valuable psychers hang out at the back and psychic power through. And yeah, they're also like a brainwashed enemy fighter. So yeah, they're great. If you've converted one, yeah, please show me. Let me know in the comments down below. Link me to the image because I want to see. They're really messed up, and I love them. They're cool as hell. Next up, the Spiker. This is the big floating head guy. Came out relatively recently from Forge World. You might have seen the pictures. Big dude strapped to a chair, giant head. Yeah, so in terms of rules, they have their own unique psychic powers. They do actually have 2 wounds, so yeah, they're pretty good actually. The stats are good. They're quite powerful. They have 2 wounds because actually previous to House of Shadows, the Spikers were House Delacque's Brute. And yeah, they kind of got downgraded to Hanger-On, and the Piscean Spectre is the new Brute. But yeah, so rules-wise, I think Spikers are pretty good. But generally speaking, I think people are going to have a pretty visceral reaction to the dude strapped to a chair, floating chair with a giant head. If you love it, then yeah, they'll be pretty good for you. But if you don't want to, you know, have a big floating head guy, then that'll probably overwrite anything that I could tell you about how good or bad they are. Next up, Whisper Merchant. This is probably one of my favourite hangers-on, and honestly, this is a compelling reason to play Delaque. I think they're really, really good. So yeah, Whisper Merchants are available to any gang for 60 credits, or House Delaque for 30. And even at you know, double the price at 60, I think they're worth considering if you don't play Delaque. They are that good. So yeah, what do? They let you change certain pre- and post-battle dice rolls to a 6. I'm not going to list all of the dice rolls that you can change, because you can have a look in the book and read them for yourself. But some of the important ones to keep in mind that you can mess with are you can mess with the scenario that you rolled. So yeah, you can possibly bump that off to something else. You can change the number of fighters that show up for the battle to a 6, so you can guarantee yourself always bringing maximum number of fighters, which is obviously very good. And also post-battle, you can change the amount of credits you're earning to a 6. So yeah, Whisper Merchants are amazing. They do have a slight downside, and that is every time you use them to change a dice roll, you have to kind of keep a tally. And when you've changed 6 dice total, you have to pay them their fee again, or they fuck off. But yeah, even then, you know, even paying again for them every so often, they are still really, really good. Yeah, worth picking up ASAP, in my opinion. And then, not quite as flashy as some of the other ones, but Rogue Docks are also a great investment. It's dangerous in the Underhive, even if you're sneaky and ambushing, and eventually you're going to get injured. And yeah, Rogue Docks are great for making sure your guys don't die. Right, so yeah, you've made your list, you've had a game or two, you're in the post-game sequence, you know, you've got some income, you're looking at your roster. What do you do now? Here's my advice for that situation. First up, get more bodies. Yeah, this is the same thing as I was saying about starting your gang. Yeah, more bodies is more good. I would suggest trying to expand until you have something like 10 to 12 members. Basically, what you want to do is you want to give yourself enough bodies to survive a bad game and still be able to go into the next game with a strong roster. 10 to 12 strong, I think you can have like a bad game and still survive the campaign. So yeah, that's a good number to aim for. You also want to start upgrading your gangers. So yeah, after your first few games, it's a good time to start buying armor for anyone. Prioritize people getting shot at. So, you know, specialists with a long rifle maybe might be getting shot at, or people might leave him alone. Yeah, I like to buy armor as a reward for gangers that have done well. You know, if they get a kill or if they do something special in the game, then you can reward them by buying them an upgrade. Hot shot packs for your las guns. Yeah, you will need to pick these up from the trading post. They're not on your house list, but they are still worth getting. And then, yeah, also have a look for grapnel launchers. They're good for your Nakghouls and any other close combat-y characters. You could also put one on a long rifle guy so that you can get up to good vantage points. Yeah, I think grapnel launchers are probably not really worth it in your initial list, but yeah, after the first few games, have a look at them. You can also get some more special weapons. So yeah, I mentioned before, but your gangers have access to expensive but potentially very strong special weapons and pistols. So picking up something like a grav pistol ganger after your first few games is probably a good call if you didn't put one in your opening list. Get some long-range options. Yeah, long rifles are great, but you can also check out the trading post if you feel you want something heavier at long range. Delaque is a sneaky, stealthy gang, but don't let that stop you from buying a heavy plasma gun or a heavy stubber and just, you know, annihilating some dudes. Also have a look at grenades. So yeah, smoke is also always good to control the battlefield, and flash grenades are also very useful. After you've kind of ticked all of those boxes, you're probably going to be at a stage where you can afford to spend money on luxuries. So, you know, buy yourself a brute, buy yourself some double up on champions, get some weird loadout you've been thinking about. But yeah, this is not a completely exhaustive list. This entire video is, you know, my opinion. Your mileage may vary, but this specific list about what to do after your first few games, this is just kind of general guidance if you're completely lost. There are going to be some options that I've missed, but overall, do what's fun to you. You know, don't just buy boring-ass gangers to get up to 12 because I told you to. If you want to immediately spend your credits on something big and expensive and ridiculous, do that because it's more fun. Right, away from the rules and onto the tabletop, here is some stuff to know about building a Delaque gang. Yeah, I mentioned this at the start. The basic Delaque gang box is, in my opinion, the worst basic box out of all the house gangs. Yeah, why is it the worst house gang box? First up, so many of the guns are in holsters or strapped to the fighters' backs. Very few of the weapons are actually being held by the fighters. Also, you don't get any las guns in the basic sprues. Also, most of the guns look very samey. Like the long rifles are not that long compared to the auto guns, as an example. And yeah, because so many of the guns are holstered on their backs, it can be tough to find stuff to put in their hands. Especially if you're someone that's really big on WYSIWYG. Yeah, if it's really important to you to, you know, keep everything that's on the ganger directly modelled on the thing, and all your guys have got stuff strapped to their backs, and it can be a bit difficult to find, you know, empty hands. And yeah, also in terms of design, the guns and pistols also feel weirdly big. And I know Games Workshop is fairly famous for giant guns. But yeah, like compared to the kind of spindly and fairly delicate design of the actual gangers, the guns and pistols look kind of big. So yeah, those are all my reasons why I think House Delaque box is the worst sprue out of any of the gangs. So I fully recommend picking up the Nakghoul box and the weapons upgrade box. The weapons upgrade box especially feels like it's directly been made to counter the shortfalls of the basic sprues. It gives you loads of las guns that are held in actual hands. Yeah, I fully recommend both of these. They're good for modelling perspective as well. They're just really, really nice designs. If you want to do some kit bashing, I find that Vansar weapons and arms can work quite well with Delaque bodies. Vansar and Delaque both have kind of a little bit slender and smaller hands compared to some of the other gangs. They're not quite as chunky, so I think the weapons look pretty good on Delaque bodies. So yeah, make friends with any local Vensar players, and Escher I think are also similar scale, and they might be good for bits for your Delaque. Plasma and Web are, I've mentioned many times, they are very strong choices on the tabletop. So plasma guns are not too difficult to find if you want to kit bash some of those. Web guns and pistols, however, are not as common in the wider 40k universe. I think the only real place that you can find web weapons is in the Genestealer Cult kits. I have no idea whether web guns are like meta in terms of how Genestealer Cult players build their armies. So I don't know if they're easy to find on, you know, bit sites, or if you have a friend who has a Genestealer Cult army. But yeah, have a look around those ranges or find players with those armies, and you might be able to find some bits to borrow if they are nice enough to let you have them. And then finally, if you're looking for some other ideas for kit bashing, Eldar or Adeptus Mechanicus bits can also work with House Delaque, especially if you're looking for spare hands or weird guns. If you've seen my House Delaque miniatures, and you've seen that I've kit bashed them with some Eldar Harlequin masks. I think House Delaque work quite well with the kind of weirdo alien vibe. Right, and then finally we've got everyone's favourite part of the video, I assume, is the example starting gangs. Yeah, who doesn't love a good gang list to have a look at? We'll start off with one box WYSIWYG gang. WYSIWYG means what you see is what you get. So this is a list that you can build, and if you have one sprue, one box, or yeah, two sprues, one box, you can build this list from one box. And all of the weapons on the list will be represented on the models. So we've got a Master of Shadows, who is armed with a flechette pistol, a web gauntlet, mesh armor, and has the spring up skill. So we're going with a kind of close-up build for our leader. Then we got a Phantom with a long rifle, a stub gun for backup, and then mesh armor and Overwatch. Then we got another Phantom with a flechette pistol, web gauntlet, mesh armor, and spring up. So same loadout as the leader, and those two can get up close and hopefully do some backstab web gauntlet action. And then we got a ghost specialist with a long rifle. Then we got two ghosts, each with a grav pistol and a stub gun as a backup. So yeah, these are kind of the only real fancy special guns that come in the basic sprue. And then we got two ghosts with auto guns for a little bit of long range pinning, and then finally we got a ghost with a shotgun for a little bit of close up punch. So yeah, it's definitely not the strongest list out there. You're missing a lot of key weapons that and tools that Delaque love to use. But if you only have one sprue, I think this is not a bad gang to make from that. I think you have a lot of options. You got some long range firepower, you got some close up stuff. You got some blast templates with those grav pistols, and you got quite a lot of bodies. So yeah, I think you can win some games with this. Moving on, we got both boxes and the upgrade pack gang. So this is assuming you buy the basic Delaque box, you buy the Delaque Untitled Champion box, and then you also get the upgrade weapons pack. So all three of those, and you can make this gang. So in this one, we've got a Master of Shadows with a long rifle, mesh armor, and Overwatch. We also got a Phantom with a plasma gun, a stub gun, mesh armor, and munitioneer to keep that gun firing. Then we've got a Nakgul with Serpent's Fangs, a stub gun, mesh armor, and the spring up skill. Ghost Specialist with a long rifle and flak armor. And then we got a Shadow with a web pistol and a stub gun. Then we got two ghosts with las guns, and then finally we got a ghost with a grav pistol and a stub gun. So yeah, we got loads of special guns in this one. We got a couple of cheap long rifle things for long range action, and then we got the fast moving Shadow with the web pistol. Yeah, I think this gang should be pretty good. Yeah, on to the next one. So yeah, this is my Psy Academy gimmick gang list. This is my attempt to make the most psychic powers work. And yeah, this is the mentor loadout that I mentioned previously in the video. So we've got a Master of Shadows who has got a web gun, mesh armor, and the mentor skill. And he's going to be moving around the battlefield with two Psygeists. And they are both basically naked. And yeah, one of them's got spatial psychosis, and one of them has got penumbral mirror. You can do some shenanigans with that, pinning people and then using penumbral mirror maybe to slingshot the Master of Shadows in with his web gun. And then yeah, he knocks people down with the web gun, and then the two Psygeists want to move in and then coup de grace them while they're sleeping. And then, yeah, they get the XP and then use Mentor to give them more XP. So then they level up and then they can spend all that sweet XP on becoming psychic powerhouses. So yeah, that little group of three hangs out together. Then we've also got a Phantom who has got Suicidal Embrace, a Plasma Pistol, a Smoke Grenade, Web Gauntlet, Mesh Armor, and he has Psy Touched as the skill. Yeah, Suicidal Embrace is the psychic power that he's taken. So yeah, he's kind of a problem solver. He's got Suicidal Embrace, so he can kind of get close to tough guy enemies and hopefully make them stab themselves. And then the Plasma Pistol and the Web Gauntlet should deal with anyone who's left. And then he can use a Smoke Grenade to lay down cover and move around without getting shot at range. And then there's a Shadow with a Web Pistol and a Stub Gun, and he'll be hanging out alongside the Phantom. Yeah, those two can move up together and kind of support each other. And we've also got a Shadow with two auto pistols, keep them cheap. And these two Shadows are going to be hanging out with that Phantom, and so they'll be keeping close. So they'll be doing the Psychoteric Choir to boost up the Phantom's range for Suicidal Embrace. Hopefully get that off and working. And then finally, or not finally, then next up we got a Nakghoul with Serpent's Fangs, Stub Gun, Mesh Armor, and Spring Up. And yeah, this is kind of your badass problem solver. He'll be going out, doing his own thing, murdering people, while your team of psychic people wander around and try and use their powers. And then yeah, finally we got a basic ghost with a basic lasgun. He ain't anything special, but he's there to do some lasgun shooting. And that comes to 1,000 credits total. Finally, we've got my personal starting gang. Yeah, this is the gang that I would choose if I was going to be starting a campaign with House Delaque. This isn't the strongest possible list. This isn't the list that I think will be the most successful, but it is the list using things that I want to try. Skills and strategies I think will be fun, and also on top of that, models that I want to use. Especially at the end there, you can see the ghost with two auto pistols. That's just a model that I think I made and I think looks cool, so he's in the list. So yeah, we've got a Master of Shadows with a long rifle, mesh armor, and Overseer. Yep, I'm doing Overseer with this list. And then we got a Phantom with a web gun, auto pistol backup, mesh armor, and fixer. Yeah, get those sweet credits coming in. Nakghoul with Serpent's Fangs, Stub Gun, Mesh Armor, and the Spring Up skill. Ghost Specialist with a long rifle. Psygeist with a stiletto knife, and he's got spatial psychosis. Again, this loadout is a bit weird, but I made the model. I think it looks cool, and that's what he's armed with. And so yeah, he makes the list. Then we got a Shadow with a web pistol. Ghost with a lasgun, Ghost with an auto gun, same credits as the lasgun. Is it worse than the lasgun? Probably, but I've got an auto gun model, and that's reason enough to put him in the list. And like the other ones, this is 1,000 credits total. So yeah, that's the end of the video. Thanks for watching to the end. What did you think of my lists? Do you have any other ideas about getting psychic characters to work in a House Delaque list? And if you're not into 1.5 hour or however long this took tactics videos, don't worry. There will be some more modelling and converting videos coming up in the near future. But yeah, thanks for watching to the end, and yeah, see you next time. Bye!